Buck Jones is next. He is an enrolled Cayuse member and is the salmon marketing specialist for the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, is involved in national and regional tribal food sovereignty groups, and serves on the board of several organizations, many organizations actually, Buck has served on over the years, but currently on several organizations, including Gorge Grown, MCAD, and One Community Health. And I just have to say, Buck, just how much you've inspired me over the years. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. You've been a great partner through the years. So my transit story, I was raised in rural eastern Oregon on the Umatilla Res, so there wasn't much transit. But when I first came to the river, mid-'80s, I think, or when I started commercial fishing, I rode Amtrak on the Oregon side. And it was real convenient to go to the Pendleton Roundup and jump on at Cascade Locks. And that's something that, I don't know if it'll ever happen in my lifetime again, but it would be nice to get Amtrak going up and down the gorge, all the way to Salt Lake City, like it used to go. So that was really my first transit kind of deal. I don't know if it was the first, but it was something that came up to me. So like Kathy mentioned, my name's Buck Jones. I'm an enrolled Cayuse tribal member. It's one of the bands of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. For the past 21 years, I've been working for Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. CRITFC, as we're known, is a technical and management agency for the 4 tribes that have treaty fishing rights along the Columbia River. My tribe being one, Warm Springs, the other tribe in Oregon, Yakima Nation in the Washington, and then the Nez Perce tribe. So we work for our tribes. Our tribal members have been fishing along the Columbia since time immemorial, so we've had trade and commerce for a long time. And in that trade, we had trade routes that, that people came. Celilo Falls was a huge economic hub at the time for both commerce and religious ceremonies. Salmon, being culturally relevant to our people, is something that salmon gave up its life many years ago for us and fed us when we was poor, pitiful people. And and in giving up its life, it made us become stewards of the land and the water, because the salmon goes out to the ocean for 3 to 5 years and comes back. And so for the salmon to have a place to spawn, we need to have keep the waters and the homelands where they go to important, to keep it sustainable. And our tribes have been sustainable for like I said, since time immemorial. I was asked to talk a little bit about the role of CRITFC in the transportation, and was told there's probably not some people that are familiar with the treaty fishing access sites and in lieu sites where many of our tribal members live. So in the 1930s, when Bonneville Dam first started, it flooded and inundated many of our traditional villages and our fishing sites where we could fish along the river. So the government at the time promised that they would rebuild and find land for these sites. The government did keep their word. It just took them 50 years. And so there was 5 original and lieu sites that are held in the trust by the Bureau of Indian Affairs that are along the Columbia River. There's one in Cascade Locks, one across the river at Fort Rains, one at Underwood, one at Cook's Landing, and then one up on the Wind River. So those were the original 5 in lieu sites, and what the intention of those was to have a seasonal use of those facilities. Some of them have restrooms, communal restrooms, fishing, water access, some clean-in tables for fish, and some residence areas, camping slots. And so those are what were in lieu of us, getting flooded. And then throughout the years, we've found the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Army Corps has found land on, for another additional 28 fishing access sites, those are called. And just for clarity, our fishing area is 147 miles from Bonneville Dam all the way to McNary. So that's 147 miles of river on both sides of the river. And there's sites, all the way up through the area. So some of those up in the eastern area, they don't have as much, water and things like that, just maybe a camping area and things like that. So many of our people, when this happened, when these sites were built or whatever, like I mentioned, the intention was for those to be used for seasonal use. But a lot of our tribal members, their ancestors and their family have always been from the river. They didn't want to go back to, say, my res or whatever, even because they was raised here. So we found that, it's a societal problem, that affordable housing's not affordable in the Gorge. And so there's year-round use of these facilities, and this is made it kind of where a lot of our members live. So I'll get to the transportation piece. I was involved, it was mentioned here earlier by a couple groups with Tara and Lisa about the Gorge studio, tourism studio. So I was involved in that when it first came, and that was my very first, one of my first big groups of people I met in my salmon marketing role. Like I mentioned, I've been with CRITFC for 21 years in different capacities, and my first job, I wish there was transportation because I was commuting from Milwaukee all the way to the Dalles, taking care of those sites along the river that I mentioned. So there wasn't no transportation. It was 180 miles just on a commute, and then I could be at McNary Dam in the morning and Bonneville in the afternoon. So when COVID started, it's when we kind of became involved in a group that wasn't called GNAC at the time, but it was a group of people that met with intentions of tribal people, the community that's, that has been here, and sometimes, it started out with a few of us, and that's how I met Kathy, and we became partners. She mentioned some of the boards that I've been on. COVID really was the underlying factor for that group to get together. And so CRITFC became involved with One Community Health as a partner. And at that time, I started going to those meetings like, how do I get my people food? How do I get people food at this in-lieu site or this fishing access site? Our markets was closed down. Toilet paper wasn't on the shelves, and it was a burden. But what happened, and when I was thinking of that, was that then we had some senior leadership come be involved and look at a bigger picture of like, hey, public health for our tribal members isn't here in the Gorge. How can we get a priority or amplify the needs of our tribal people, because our tribal people rely on Indian Health Service, and those are only based on the reservations, and transportation's huge. It's a barrier for our people. So to go back to for me, I drove here from Pendleton this morning. It's 2.5 hours if I wanted to go to Yellow Hawk Clinic, and if you're from Nez Perce, it's another 2.5, 3 hours, and it's an hour each way to Yakima and to Warm Springs. So we became a partner, and we didn't know nothing about that, but COVID really hit close to home. We had a Salilo tribal member that was a CRITFC employee that passed from COVID. So in that, COVID wasn't like, oh, this isn't just happening in Kirkland, Washington at the senior center home. This isn't just happening in the Far East. This is happening right here. So what happened is we became partners with One Community Health, Oregon Health Authority, and we start having at that time testing events at different parts of the village. And a real success during that thing, I mentioned the the length of our fishery is that we was able to partner with the help of Kathy, and I don't know if Sarah was on then at that time. We had an event, a testing event at Celilo, and we was able to get transportation from those people that lived all the way down at North Bonneville, all the way to Boardman and sites in between, to come to that testing event, to get our tribal members at that testing event. Where if there wasn't transit and there wasn't a partnerships that was developed, they would have never been able to come and get tested for COVID. And then, as it merged into vaccine events, some of that same coordination was happening. So that was a really, really huge success for us in transportation for our people. Another thing that happened during COVID is at the Wyeth access site down here on milepost 51 on 84, we was able to work with CRITFC was able to work with the Army Corps and the Bureau of Indian Affairs to get a bus stop at that place at Wyeth, and there had never been a bus stop on any of these treaty fishing access sites. So that was some of the successes. The good things, that's the good things, but I just want to touch on a few maybe barriers why it's not been so successful for our tribal members is that we're guarded. We have to earn our trust, our tribal members. We've heard a lot of things and things like that, and our people are guarded for our own reasons. Throughout history, it's not nobody in this room's fault or whatever. It's just the way our people are. And so some of the outreach and some of the things that we've tried to have stops at aren't really accessible for our members. It's hard for some of our elders and things to walk, all the way to a bus stop. And if it's not right there in their things, and I think it's just maybe more outreach and things like that. The bus stop, have one bus that comes back at 4 or 5 hours later. So the convenience isn't there. They mentioned that, there was a bus that went through and they asked if they could stop at the exit and he would walk, and they didn't allow him to do that. There may be other reasons than that, but that's just some of the things that I've heard personally. I would like to see it evolve and become more of an option for our tribal members to use it like the stories I've heard here, to use it to go from one site and go to another site. But there is one things that coordination that was talked about, that they've been able to use the Gorge transit system to go like to Yakima and coordinate with the other, I think it's Mount Adams. So there is some positives, but there's still some work to do with the tribes, I think. And, I'm not real familiar with it, but I look at kayak at the Umatilla Reservation, how successful a transportation piece that they got for our area. They go all the way from Mission there, all the way to Tri-Cities, all the way to Boardman, all the way to Walla Walla, LeGrand, and a lot of people use that for, employment at C2IR, but also the tribal members use it to go shopping and things like that. And if we could get that to be with our tribal people, I think that would be a big goal of mine, and hopefully I can help facilitate that. So thank you for your time. Thank you.